Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? 917.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Paul from. Hello. This is Paul from Queens.
Paul from Queens. What's on your mind?
Hi. I'm sorry about your divorce. I went through a divorce years ago, and I know it was really rough. I keep waiting for you to turn into men's rights, activist.
That's what I'm doing on the weekends. That's what I do on the weekends. I go to a men's rights.
The whole court system stacked against me. Do you see? Women are like Air America. It's the same thing.
Go ahead. Sorry, that was Michael.
No. That's what,
I'm sorry.
but I guess the one thing I learned, you guys keep mentioning about how Jordan Peterson, these guys, you don't know why they kind of harp on these small points. And I know a lot of it's because they're probably paid by, Cokes and whoever. But the one thing I learned in the whole divorce process, which is really useful for me in terms of talking to people, who I disagree with politically, is that they won't listen to you until you've listened to them. And so you can't actually, until you can get them to a point where you can say what they want. You can say, okay, this is what you're thinking. And they say, that's right. Only then can they listen to you. So I just feel like until that point, when you argue with someone politically, all you're doing is reinforcing their beliefs and, making them more energetic.
Well,
so,
I will tell you this. I take phone calls live, and I do not screen them. And I invite all of these people, their followers, their promoters, to call in and raise any of these issues at any time. Dave Rubin will never come on this show. He will never have me on his show. He will never debate me in any other place. They won't do it because they know, so the idea of me saying that to them is all well and good in theory, but they're not going to hear me. Now, you show me another show that will go on live and will take calls from anybody without screening them, and is as open to getting calls as I am. And I won't, if I get a call that someone wants to say Baba Booey or do anything, I'm not going to call them later and tell them that, try and intimidate them. And why are you calling? I don't do that. So I'm certainly opening to having a dialogue with any of these people. But in the absence of the ability to do that, then I'm just going to knock down their arguments. I hear what they're saying. I mean, I frankly, I don't think Dave Rubin's saying anything. And what Jordan Peterson is saying, I certainly heard when I was in junior high from people about,
chaos. What kind of junior high were you in?
Well, no, boys have a certain development of their perspective on women in junior high, and so you hear that those type of perspectives. But I get your point. Yeah. But I'm not trying to convert Jordan Peterson. I'm trying to, make it clear that the ideology that he's promoting is vapid and nefarious. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, this tactic might work on people who have sort of fallen prey to right populist ideas out in the world, but these particular members of the intellectual vanguard we're not going to have an honest debate. They're not going to have an honest debate with us. They're very disingenuous.
I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think that you're not talking about actually, you're talking about people who might be drawn to a Jordan Peterson. You're not talking about Jordan Peterson, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why they, you were like, why do these white guys get so worked up about, not like another white guy who can't speak on a college campus, or just kind of like these small things.
Dude, I got news for you. I'm a white guy. Yeah. I'm a white guy. And I grew up around a lot of people like this who take issue with, the hippy dippies on the campuses who are speaking out. And I know I am fully aware of the attitudes that that drive this sense of like, I can't talk anymore. I can't say certain things about certain people. People get too sensitive. I know a lot of people like that. Most of the people I grew up with were like that. So it's not a mystery to me where this comes from. I get it. I totally get it. And I think at the heart of it, frankly, it is people feeling like they are losing their status in society. And guess what? They are. They are. This is a zero-sum game. If you have had an inordinate amount of status as a function of something that has nothing to do with you, but has to do with the subjugation of other people who might be competing against you, broadly speaking, it's not true for every single individual, but broadly speaking, you're going to lose your status when they start getting more opportunity and more voice in society. That's just the reality of it.
Well, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, though. Like, I think that's what
when
our
it comes to
caller's
social
getting at a
status,
little bit.
it
Like,
has to be.
I mean, status is so intimately tied to economics that, like,
it's
the
not just
goal of a lot of leftist thought right now is how do we get people to become left populists?
I get that. But the fact of the matter is that every bit of our culture was centered around one specific group of people. And that was not just an economic calculation. It just so happened that those people had the power. So they're going to lose that status. There's just no denying it. It is a zero-sum game.
But why do people feel the need to have a special status in the first place?
Because human beings, I think, like to feel that they are special. And human beings don't like to lose what they have.
It's kind of
the same
you got to be
thing.
careful. You do have to be careful.
Analysis
Hold on.
You
It
do have
is
to be
the
careful
same
making
thing
those.
as saying no one's going to give up power, right? No one's going to give up power.
Well, actually, people,
because status translates into power.
Well, actually, no. People have actually. I mean, like if you look at the negotiation of apartheid, people did voluntarily give up power.
All right. Well,
which-
so then you wait a sec. But
no.
but-
Let me just finish. I just want
but
to say.
no.
well,
Wait a
I
sec.
don't-
They didn't give up. No.
They literally did. Yes.
Without
apartheid-
threat.
No, of course there was threat. That's part of the
Okay.
process. Absolutely. But they also did end up peacefully negotiating it. So I'm just saying I just think
They
in
didn't
general.
want to, but
well,
they did.
no, by the 80s, actually, people like de Klerk did. They saw the bigger picture. But the thing is I would just be careful of, especially when we're on the left, of kind of naturalizing that sort of thing. Because as soon as we're into like human beings are X in terms of a desire for a certain thing, we're in Peterson territory. So
No,
I just be careful.
I don't think so. I think it's very hard for some people, not all people,
Well,
but
yeah.
the people that we're talking about, obviously, the idea of losing their status. They don't like the idea that they have to press, 1 to speak English. Okay? And that runs the gamut. Wealthy people, poor people, middle income people. That runs the gamut. They don't like having to, there's resent. Now, that may or may not be tied into some deep-seated economic issues. For some people, I'm sure it is. For others, not so much. And Jordan Peterson does not resent women because of economic issues. Unless, maybe he had an ex-wife that took some cash.
Yeah, like these guys seem to me like basically they're trying to justify the sort of power and status that was granted to white males in the middle of the century. And so like there needs to be somebody speaking up for that. And yes, like that is
It's a zero-sum
fundamentally
game.
Oh, that's definitely what they're doing. You're 100% right. But I think what I'm concerned about what you say when you keep saying it's a zero-sum game is that if the only choice is to have like essentially diversity capitalism or white supremacy capitalism, of course, I will fight for and pick diversity capitalism. But that is in the framework of it's a zero-sum game, and there will always be an appeal for white identity arguments. If you come in and you say, yes, with a regard to a very narrow thing about social status, which I think you're trying to draw a really narrow point here.
I said
You're-
specifically social status.
Well, okay, But I think the rhetoric, though, of zero-sum game, when in most people's mind, that does cue economic insecurity, and that does cue a whole other set of challenges.
Zero-sum game in
which
terms of
gets us
social
back-
status is exactly what I said.
Well, social status
Yeah,
will
I-
inevitably look and be experienced differently in a more equal society. We know that for a fact economically. So the tension that is built in people's minds around the types of issues that they zero in on is absolutely atmospherically influenced by the economy.
Look,
It is.
listen,
There's a
that's fine.
material
That's fine.
basis
But
for
you're
culture.
trying to force into what we're talking about a different. I'm not suggesting that in the event that we can get to a point where we have a completely economic egalitarian society,
That's not what I'm saying.
that there will be a less concern about status. But the fact is, right now, we have people who, the reason why people are flocking to people like Jordan Peterson to the extent that they are, or to Dave Rubin, or to Donald Trump, is because they feel, you look at that room of those people in Indianapolis, okay, full of white guys. Full of white guys. Not white women, white guys. Full of them. And they feel that they are losing. That's why the Merry Christmas thing resonates in that room in May. It's because we feel like stuff that was ours, we are losing our social status. You can argue that you can ameliorate that by having a economically egalitarian society, and I think that's possible. But
Definitely true.
It's also
Well,
and the
no,
fact
no,
that you
definitely
wouldn't
true.
think that that social anxiety is not connected to and influenced by economics, broadly speaking, is really. I mean, that's a.
oh, I think that
That's
social
quite
anxiety.
a bold case.
no,
I mean,
well,
that's,
I think-
that's pretty.
Listen,
That,
it would be
yeah.
nice if that was the case.
No,
but,
in
but
terms
show
of-
me the evidence.
What?
Because I can show you the dispositive evidence. I can show you that the
I
per
know-
capita income
That's not just
of a
about
Trump
individual
voter
earnings. I know
is
that.
higher.
That-
Okay.
It's
I'm
not just
aware of
about
that.
income.
It's not-
Economic anxiety doesn't mean that you're currently experiencing economic hardship.
That Trump voters
Like,
have
whether
no more economic anxiety than Clinton voters.
Whether
Unless
it's
it's-
rational or not.
Unless it's specifically looked at as relative, which I think, we can say how people
Exactly.
perceive the thing as zero sum, but I think I agree with Sam. Like, I'm not quite sure I'm following the argument
Wait.
here. But but the idea that like they're definitely going to lose that sort of social status, that also translates
have
to
to.
economic power. Like they are
have
going to
to.
lose that.
They have to. They lose it. There's more women who's going to be working in their office. There's going to be, the education rates of African Americans go up. There are going to be more Latino
Well, there's no
people
doubt. Look,
in this
then
country.
they're-
They're
then
going
that-
to lose their
that's
economic status.
true.
I don't
I
just
mean,
think that
well-
you guys are wrong about anything. You're just not looking at the whole picture.
Well, I mean, you want me to look at a different picture than I'm talking about. That's all. I'm
mean,
looking at this
there's-
picture.
there's a
He
mi-
called in. We're talking about Jordan Peterson. And I'm saying that it is a zero-sum game with social status, that it used to be I could watch TV and every story I would watch, every episode of TV, every commercial, someone like me, was the central character. And I would see myself reflected in there. And now I watch it and I don't see that. Period. End of story. That is the reality. And people don't like that. There are, not everybody, but a lot of those people don't like it. They don't like watching TV and seeing in that Cialis commercial, why is there a black guy there? Why is it not being sold to me? Why is it used to be Father Knows Best? And the star of that show was the son.
It wasn't Jabari.
Not the daughter.
It wasn't Jabari
Where do you
knows
think
best.
those feelings come from, though? Where do you think their basis is?
Because
You think it's an
people
ahistorical
like
force?
People like to look at the mirror and see themselves
See,
reflected.
that's where I disagree
I don't
with
think it's
you. It
ahistorical,
doesn't
though.
have to be like that.
Well, I mean,
like if we
it
stop
is.
telling, like, look, if we stop telling people that they all have to fight for scraps of an ever shrinking pie, then that's much more inspiring of a vision. Like the time when this culture war bullshit comes to the forefront is when people don't have the option to vote for their economic interests. And I really believe that.
what period in our history did this cultural stuff was it not at the forefront?
I mean, you want to go way back in time to like hunter-gatherer times?
No, I'm saying in our society today, in the United States of America, at what point was that what you're talking about?
We
was
live
the case?
under capitalist white supremacist patriarchy, so of course there was no time when it wasn't like that here.
Okay, so my point is, having lived under a capitalist white supremacist patriarchy for over 200 years, that white guys resent, and it's a zero-sum game, and I'm going to repeat this again, it's a zero-sum game. They are losing that white supremacy. They are losing that privilege. And the thought of losing that privilege is why someone like Jordan Peterson resonates with them, and it's why 30 years ago or 50 years ago, 70 years ago would have been Father Coughlin.
Can I just suggest
that's all I'm saying.
I'm just trying to add just a little. I'm not trying to get into this big macro fight about it, but I just think that there's like when it is the first point I would make is I do think that some of the same people that are obsessed with Jordan Peterson now, and you go back to Father Coughlin, but maybe 10 years ago they'd be interested in the 4-hour work week, or 20 years ago they'd be interested in like Silicon Valley get-rich-quick schemes. And I think that they're in a similar market and appealing to some similar sentiments, and the fact that now it's so specifically colored by certain reactionary ideas of reinforcing hierarchies and justifying capitalism actually does reflect a broader economic and situational anxiety, which is connected to status. And I don't think you could purely...
But you're saying there's more of this today than there was 20 years ago?
Amongst the markets that they're tapping of young men, I would say absolutely. I don't think... Do you think you would know better than me? Do you think 20 years ago that it was normal to have, and maybe it's just pre-internet, but that there was a bunch of people in their 20s flocking to go see a histrionic, crying college professor who obsessed
there
about...
wasn't people going to...
but
they were going to see... They were going to see PJ O'Rourke, who was saying the fucking same shit.
He wasn't exactly saying the same shit. I think they're tapping into slightly different things. But the second point that I would make...
25 years ago, in the wake of Reagan, it was worse.
PJ O'Rourke be longer than 25? I thought that was like in the 80s, but whatever. The second point is, I think that if the frame is that it's a zero-sum game, and most people hear that, a lot of people hear that not just status-wise in the way you're making it, but covering the whole basis. And I think that there are some people who it's like, and I'm just being clinical here, it's not right, but if their read is like, okay, well, we're going to have a shrinking pie and there's going to be fewer and fewer opportunities, and now you're also telling me that I'm not going to have those same innate advantages, then maybe I should be interested in a white discrimination-based white supremacy capitalism, because you're telling me that the only options are a shrinking pie with more diversity, or a shrinking pie that reinforces traditional hierarchies. And I think that framing is something we got to get around and definitely present to people, that broader economic delivery is not contradictory of greater diversity and representation and losing that social status. And I agree with you, there's some people that will be upset about that regardless of the economic
That's
picture.
the fans we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, we still need to disaggregate. Yeah, but you constantly hammer that point without bringing in some of those subtleties. And I think that could be off-putting.
A lot of these people are probably on the fence, you know?
I think that there are some people who, if you don't bring in the economics and the broader picture, they're just going to hear
that
you're
may be
a
the case.
privileged guy, relatively speaking, telling me that I'm going to lose my privilege. Okay.
Like if you look at the people the slice of white working class voters who voted for Obama and then for Trump, like, did they magically get more racist all of a sudden, or was there something else driving that?
I mean, look, I don't know if the Jordan Peterson fans are the people who went from Obama to Trump. You don't know that either. I'm saying, which is what this phone call was about Jordan Peterson et al. And I am saying that these people are reacting to a loss of social status. And I am quite confident that the fans of Jordan Peterson are not in that Indianapolis arena, are not the people that we're talking about who voted for Obama and then flipped to Trump.
Don't you think there's some overlap here?
It's possible.
Like, we talk about this a lot on
It's possible.
the Antifada this week, actually, sort of the
but that's all conjecture.
The material basis for everyone feeling so alienated and angry at women and angry at minorities. Like, what do you do with these people?
The idea that this is new is just bizarre to me. If you want to argue that 20 years ago there was not these sentiments, and maybe there was like 35 years ago, but there was a dip and then it's gone back up, show me the data on that, because that's certainly not the way that I experienced it going up.
I would just guess that the only thing that would make it more acute now is that actually the tide is turning on these things. Like, it's not post-New Deal. Right. Like, it's not post-New Deal when these things were cemented into place, which, like, that's specifically the historical reason that I think these people do respond in a way. And I know I don't agree with it, the zero-sum thing, right? Like, I think it is better that we don't do this. But
bad frame.
But it's a bad frame, but specifically from their eyes, it's true. Right? Like, they don't know about like the positives of socialism, right? They know that
that's a fair point.
They know that they would have been the man of the house controlling shit, and now they don't.
Yes,
Yeah, but they
exactly.
also know that
and that's the
maybe-
point. It's not a question of a frame. It's just simply a description of a dynamic. I'm not going out and I'm not going out and saying you should we should have people campaigning saying like, look, you're going to lose your social status. You got to suck it up.
I think, but that was the Hillary
That was
Clinton
the-
campaign,
that still
along
is.
with correct statements about transgender
I'm
rights.
not
as an
defending
example.
the Clinton campaign.
Like,
I'm just
look-
talking
Well,
about
whatever.
the
Take
reality
it beyond
of
the
what we're
Clinton
seeing.
campaign.
And in fact, the veneer of a college professor saying, justifying this is a function of it getting of the last grasps, of there being less space for people to articulate. I don't want a darkie moving in on my neighborhood. I don't want busing. I don't want the women to come in and take a managerial role. I don't want
That's what you said this morning.
Yeah, I don't want these Latinos come in and ruining our culture. To have the veneer of a college professor who's coming in and expressing these things in a more intellectual way.
Well, we
and
need to follow the money, though.
But
Like, don't you see that these systems all benefit
That's
the
true, but
ruling
just-
class that wants to divide us against one another so we don't work together?
The subtlety, though, I think you're missing, though, Sam, is like when you talk about Jordan Peterson people. No, seriously, it actually matters. Like when you're talking about like a profile of somebody in their mid-20s, and granted that like they're still relatively high in the totem pole, who's like not able to get started economically, but might be very highly educated, and it's a different version of those same resentments, but it's getting presented in a very different way and in a very different set of economic anxieties around it. And those distinctions actually matter. If we
Yeah,
want to
and
get
I don't
specific
think-
about dealing with it.
I don't think it's coddling these MRA dudes or whatever to try to understand where this phenomenon comes from so that we can solve it in a way that makes sense.
I think I am providing a suggestion as to where this dynamic comes from. And I think that there is more data on my side to suggest, you when faced with the dilemma of trying to argue that this comes from economic anxiety, that anxiety gets expressed not as their economic status, but then it has to go to the point of a sort of intangible, almost immeasurable notion of economic anxiety that's in there. Now, I would argue that it probably contributes in some fashion, but the fact is that I think the arguments here are just sort of cultural. I see it with very wealthy people who don't have any economic anxiety. There are we should go over the two studies now we have seen about those Trump voters.
I mean, if you want to go back to that, and I think it's a really important example. I've seen a lot of liberals doing some hand wringing about like, oh, these people are so racist and sexist, they'll vote against their own economic interests in order to punish women and minorities.
Liberals vote against
but
their
that
economic
implies
interests too.
that they have the
I
ability
vote for
to
more
vote
taxes.
for their interests, and they didn't. They didn't this time around, and they don't usually. So that's on the Democratic Party.
Well, that's fine, but you're taking
feel-
this
I feel-
conversation much further.
This
afield
caller
than
has a lot of
Oh my
stamina.
God!
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
so
God!
sorry. You know
Wow.
what? Let's let him have the last word. How about that?
Good day, sir.
Yeah. Goodbye. Thanks for starting this conversation, you jerk. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
I feel like the child of divorced parents now.
You are.
Just one quick thing, I guess, just on this point, and just on the loss of status. I mean, I think one thing to look at is when pro athletes retire, they say pro athletes die twice. Once when they retire, once when they actually die, and like the loss of status is like a huge emotional loss. You know, look when Ronda Rousey lost, she was breaking down in tears. She wanted to kill herself just because, but she was still a millionaire and healthy. And so I feel like
Same in show business.
talking about
Same in show business.
but dealing with
You
mental
didn't
health
have
issues
that much
is also
status to
important. All right.
lose,
No, I-
Samantha.
Well, we live
I
in a
didn't,
system where people are identified by what they do for work.
Well, I mean, it's also, I appreciate the call, but I mean, people write
Thanks a lot.
songs about, glory days. Bruce Springsteen wrote that, like people do, like being the big person on campus, whatever it was.
Bruce
I was
Springsteen
the-
wouldn't write
I
songs
was
about
the-
glory days if it wasn't for capitalism.
I-
Sam. So in your face.
I was the homecoming queen. I'm not anymore. I'm upset about that.
Well, I think
mean,
homecoming queen is definitely
people
capitalism. I
don't
think we gotta-
people don't like to lose status and attention.
Hi,
Really, it
I'm
comes
Sam
down to-
Seder. Here's my message. You're going to lose. That's our whole agenda. Your status is
So
gone.
inspiring.
It's going away, and you're not going to be in the Cialis commercials anymore.
There you
And
go.
your economic concerns, it's all bullshit. It's all nonsense.
No, I'm not saying that.
I know.
You just gotta be
I know.
careful whenever you make any blanket statements about human nature. And I think as a leftist, I am more optimistic about the potential of humanity. Like I think we have the potential for bad stuff.
I'm
and
not.
good
Look,
stuff and-
listen. I'm not being pessimistic. I just think that it is not a controversial statement to say people don't like to lose what they have.
Whoa, who let in the reactionary?
I mean, if you want to go back in time, I can tell you about the materialist basis for women's oppression. It begins with private property.
I that may be the case.
You want to know something about homecoming queens? Winnie was one. And I nailed her on the first night I saw her. It's
All right,
true.
look,
By the way, total
We only
bitch,
have
though.
now. I'm going to take one more phone call. It's going to be a random one.
Great Friday show.